Hello, everybody. This is Dooster with Cryptids and Critters Paranormal. I got a little story I want to share with you today. And if you will, kind of bear with me. My throat is kind of scratchy, and I'm going to try my best to get through this. It is kind of lengthy, but I'm going to try to get through it the best I can. So, y'all, please bear with me. I call this the Kelly, Kentucky Alien Invasion. Like I said, it happened in Christian County, Kentucky, August 21st, 1955. It's also referred to as the Hopkinsville Goblins. If there ever was a year for UFO sightings, 1954 would be at the top of the list. Not only at the local level, but worldwide as well. For that year alone, there were literally thousands of UFO sightings and encounters. Now, what made 1954 different from the rest? Was it because Dwight D. Eisenhower, the president at the time, met with and reached an agreement with ETs, as some claim he did? If so, that would explain a lot. And it kind of makes you wonder what all was included in the agreement. That is, if there was an agreement to start with. Did he agree to allow abductions or maybe even experimentation on humans and cattle? If so, then what did we get in return? The transistor, microwave, advanced technology perhaps, or maybe even a solemn promise not to blow planet Earth out of the galaxy. We do know that President Eisenhower did have a strong belief in life on other planets. So who better to meet with those from other planets, or maybe even another solar system? But that's a deep rabbit hole, and we'll venture down that one some other time. On the evening of August 21st, 1955, an alleged encounter took place in rural Christian County, Kentucky, in a small community of Kelly, which is located 7.5 miles north of Hopkinsville. On this particular day, Elmer Lucky Sutton and his wife Vera were playing host and hostess for his co-worker from Pennsylvania, named Billy Ray Taylor. His wife was with him. Her name was June. Elmer was in his early 20s and worked for a traveling carnival, so he was out of town for long periods at a time. He had Lucky tattooed across his fingers, and that's where he got his nickname from. It was a Sunday, and Elmer's mother, 50-year-old widow named Glennie Mae Langford, was planning on preparing a late Sunday dinner for her family after church. Miss Glennie, as she was called, lived just down the road at the old Sutton home place, where Elmer and his brother John Charlie were born and raised. Their mother had remarried and resided with their 3 preteen children in a little 3-room weatherboarded house that had no insulation, no electricity, no indoor plumbing, and no telephone. Water for cooking and drinking was obtained from an old hand-dug well a few yards behind the house. And it was about as rustic and backwoods as you could get. Glennie Mae was cooking a Sunday meal on an old wood stove when Elmer, Vera, and the Taylors arrived that afternoon. John Charlie and his wife Aileen had arrived a few minutes earlier and were sitting at the table talking to Aileen's brother, O.B. Baker. After the meal, the dishes on the table were cleared and a deck of cards took their place. During the break in the game, Billy Ray picked up the near-empty water bucket and took it to the well to refill it. As he was drawing the bucket from the well, he looked up and witnessed what he described as an immense shining object, landing in a small ravine about a quarter mile from a Sutton house. Terrified, he ran back to the house to inform the others what he had just seen: a round, metallic object with rainbow streaks trailing behind it, moving through the sky above the farm. But everyone thought he was either joking or had maybe just seen a shooting star. He could not convince them otherwise. Suddenly, the Sutton's dogs began to bark ferociously and seemed very agitated. Lucky and Billy Ray grabbed their guns and went outside to investigate what was going on with the dogs and were stunned by what they found. A 3 to 4 foot tall creature was headed toward them with its hands in the air and seemed to be floating a few inches above the ground. It was gray in color, with large eyes, a long thin mouth, and large ears. It had 2 short legs and talon-type claws extended from its fingertips. The feet resembled suction cups. It was something like they had never seen before, and the men were terrified, to say the least. As the creature advanced toward them, Billy Ray raised his .22 caliber target pistol and fired at close range. At the same time, Lucky leveled his shotgun on the creature and fired. Neither the pistol nor the shotgun seemed to have any detrimental effect on the strange being. There was no doubt in their minds that they had just hit the creature and were surprised when the small creature did a backflip, then scurried into the woods. Billy Ray and Lucky retreated to the safety of the house to regroup and gather their thoughts. A few minutes later, they saw another creature looking at them through the window. The 2 men blasted away at the window and immediately ran outside to see if they had killed it. All they found was a large gaping hole where the window screen once was. Glennie couldn't comprehend what all the commotion was about, as she had lived on a property for decades and had never experienced anything even remotely as strange as this. Elmer called them otherworldly goblins, which upset the young children. Glennie sent them off to bed. Suddenly, a pair of glowing eyes and a set of talons appeared at the living room window, and John Charlie fired a shot from his 20-gauge shotgun, taking out the window glass. Billy Ray followed up with a round from the pistol. The creature did a backflip and took off running. A few minutes later, a figure about 3 feet tall emerged from the darkness and made its appearance in the front doorway. Glennie screamed, and everyone came running. Billy Ray shot at the creature, but only succeeded in putting a bullet hole in the screen door. He then stepped outside onto the front porch, where a hand with claws reached down from the roof and touched his hair. Aileen reached out the door and yanked him back inside the house. Elmer then rushed outside and shot the goblin off the roof. It simply rolled off the roof and disappeared into the woods, apparently uninjured. Backed up by Billy Ray, Elmer surveyed the front yard while the others waited inside the house. John Charlie stood ready with his shotgun locked and loaded. Looking up in the maple tree in the front yard, they saw one of the little men, as they called it, perched on a branch above them. They shot at it, but instead of it falling to the ground, it simply floated off. Suddenly, another one came around the corner of the house, and they both opened fire on it. The noise they heard when they hit it sounded like bullets hitting metal. Like the other little man, it also floated away. Finally realizing their gunfire was useless against these beings, the men retreated back into the house. Excuse me. Once inside, they tried to collect their thoughts and had more questions than answers. What are these things, and where did they come from? Are they goblins or some type of demons? As far as their raised arms, did their raised arms indicate they meant no harm? Billy Ray pointed out whenever a light came on, the beings backed away and surmised that bright light seemed to hurt their large, yellow-pupiled eyes. They lit every lantern in the house and waited. Outside, it was eerily silent when they heard something scratching on the roof. Elmer rushed outside and saw one of the beings perched atop the roof. He aimed at the creature and squeezed off a shot. The being floated down and scrambled out of sight beyond the trees, seemingly unharmed, just like the others. Finally realizing that they were definitely up against something out of the ordinary, they decided to evacuate the house while the coast was clear and seek help from the Hopkinsville police. As there were several people in the house at the time, they all loaded into 2 separate pickup trucks and headed toward Hoptown. A few minutes later, they arrived at the police station, and a sergeant working the front desk didn't know what to think as 11 strangers walked through the door a little before midnight. Elmer told him they needed help. They had been fighting Little Silver Men for hours. Their story was so odd and bizarre that he thought they were joking. But finally they were able to convince him that they were telling the truth. Not knowing exactly what to believe, the sheriff phoned Chief Russell Greenwell, who in turn radioed Kentucky State Police and the Christian County Sheriff's Office and nearby Fort Campbell Army Base, who in turn dispatched some of their own police personnel to the scene. To make matters worse, the local paper got wind of it and sent one of their staff photographers. When the police, numbering some over 20, arrived at the farmhouse, they conducted a thorough search of the immediate area around the house. Authorities searched the property with flashlights but found no signs of the little men. Only holes in the window screens and plenty of shotgun shell casings. During the investigation, one of the officers thought he had seen something glowing in the woods, but a search of the woods turned up nothing out of the ordinary. One odd thing that was noted during the investigation was that the ground beneath where Elmer had shot one of the beings appeared to have been stained with a substance that had an iridescent sheen to it when viewed from an angle. They found no physical evidence whatsoever of any creatures, but did take note of the numerous bullet holes through the windows and walls of the house. One would, one would think at this point that maybe there was some alcohol involved, but the police readily admitted that the Suttons were not drunk and appeared to be genuinely frightened by something or someone. Besides, Glennie Mae was a very religious church-going woman and allowed no alcohol on her property or in her home at any time. When interviewed by the police, one of the neighbors stated that he noticed some lights in the woods behind the Sutton farm and figured the family was out back searching for one of their pigs that had gotten out. He also admitted hearing the gunshots a little later and suspected the Suttons were dealing with a bobcat or some other critter that had been preying on their livestock. The police were on the scene until around 2:15 that morning, when they packed up and left, vowing to return and complete their investigation in daylight. At 3:30 in the morning, after a short and troubled nap, Glennie awoke and at the sight of one of the little green men. Glennie awoke at the sight of one of the little men on the other side of her bedroom window. She called out to Elmer, who was dozing on the couch in the living room. He and Billy Ray spent the next couple of hours watching guard with their guns. The creatures apparently left just before daybreak and were never seen again by the Suttons. Although there were 11 people in the Sutton farmhouse during the encounter, only 7 actually witnessed the strange creatures. June Taylor was too frightened to look and kept her face hidden to keep from seeing anything. Lonnie Langford, along with his younger brother and sister, stayed hidden in a bedroom during the encounter. According to some reports, the Hopkinsville Police Department submitted a formal request for the United States Air Force to investigate the encounter, though no such investigation reports have been located at this time. Surprisingly, There is no mention of this encounter in the Project Blue Book files. By this time, Lucky and Billy Ray had returned to work at the carnival, now located in Evansville, Indiana, and were unable to give their depositions to the investigators. The 5 remaining witnesses were interviewed individually and apart from the others, and gave their full account of the night of terror they had just experienced. It was never determined exactly how many goblins there were. While there were only 2 seen at one time, the newspaper article states 12. News of the encounter with the small aliens spread like wildfire, and the following day, the Kentucky New Era newspaper published a story of the family's encounter. The newspaper misquoted the son's description of little gray men as little green men, and a new phrase was coined. A lot of people believe the encounter never took place, that the Suttons were simply perpetuating a hoax. But if that was the case, what would be their reasoning behind that? They made no money from the story, and they accrued a lot of debt having to repair the damage they did to their own house. Publicity, maybe? That seems like a lot of trouble just to get your name in the local paper. All of the witnesses to the encounter made sketches of what the creature looked like, and the drawings were practically identical. This case is still being investigated even today, and there have been many books and television specials produced relating to it. In the days that followed the 1955 incident, dozens of UFO enthusiasts converged on a small farm, hoping to get a glimpse of any possible evidence left behind by the so-called little green men from outer space. After the encounter, Glennie, who had always lived in the country, was so shaken that she sold the farmhouse and moved to an apartment in town where she felt safer. Glennie passed away in 1977 and was laid to rest in the Owens Cemetery in Kelly, Kentucky. And because of this encounter, the small town of Kelly, Kentucky hosts the Little Green Men Days Festival every year. And that's my story on the Little Green Men, the Hopkinsville Goblins, the Kelly creatures. Hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, my throat was giving me a little trouble today. It's kind of hard to talk, but I wanted to get that story out there. I hope you enjoyed it. If you don't mind, subscribe to my channel, Cryptids and Critters Paranormal. I also have a Facebook page by the same name, Cryptids and Critters Paranormal. And once again, I'm the Dooster, and I hope you enjoyed it, and stay in touch, and we'll be back.